They say money is power. But when you reach the level of a trillionaire, money transforms into something unrecognizable. It becomes a living, breathing entity, and it is always hungry. Welcome to the dark side of wealth. Meet Elias Thorne, a man who once possessed everything the world could offer. He owned skyscraper towers that pierced the clouds and private islands that didn't appear on any map. But behind the golden gates of his empire, there was a secret that screamed in the silence of the night. 25 years ago, Elias was nothing more than a desperate man in a failing office. His company, Thorne Industries, was hours away from bankruptcy. That was the night he didn't go home. Instead, he stayed in his office, and legend says he wasn't alone. A deal was struck in the shadows, not with a bank, but with something far more ancient. The terms were simple. He would become the wealthiest man in human history. His competitors would vanish in mysterious accidents, and every investment he touched would turn to pure gold. But there was a catch. The debt would be collected on the 21st year of his peak. For 2 decades, Elias lived like a king. He bought companies, he bought governments, he bought time. But as the clock ticked closer to the deadline, the atmosphere in his mansion changed. The gold on his walls began to look like dried blood in the moonlight. He stopped sleeping. He claimed the shadows in his boardroom were talking to him, reminding him of the price he had agreed to pay. Today is the final day. The 21st year has ended. The world woke up to find Thorne Industries in chaos. Elias Thorne is gone. His massive bank accounts remain untouched. His luxury cars are in the garage, but his bed was never slept in. Some believe he tried to run, but where do you hide from a shadow you invited in? Others say that if you walk past his mansion at midnight, you can still hear the clinking of gold coins, followed by a desperate, hollow scream. Elias Thorne didn't just build a fortune, he built a cage. In the end, we must ask ourselves, is the world's greatest wealth worth the eternal price of your soul? You decide. This is Fortune Fears. The world only knows Elias Thorne as the master of markets, the man who owns the horizon. But before the empire, there was the silence of a cold basement in the heart of a forgotten city. Elias was a shadow of a man, defeated by a world that had no room for his dreams. His pockets were empty, but his mind was a storm of ambition and rage. He had lost everything: his family, his home, and his dignity. On a night when the sky bled purple and the rain fell like shards of glass, Elias sat alone, staring at a single flickering candle. It was then that the air turned freezing. A presence emerged from the corner of the room. Not a ghost, but a void that consumed the light. It didn't speak with a voice. It whispered directly into his soul. "You want the world?" the darkness asked. "I can give you the keys to every vault, the loyalty of every king, and wealth that never ends." Elias felt a shiver of pure terror, but his hunger for power was stronger than his fear. The entity offered a contract not written on paper, but etched in the fabric of time. For 21 years, the world would be his playground. He would have the Midas touch. But there was a catch, a debt that would be collected when the clock struck midnight on the final day. Elias looked at his trembling hands, then at the vast darkness before him. He didn't ask about the price. He didn't ask about the soul. He only saw the gold that began to shimmer in the shadows. With a voice that cracked like old parchment, he uttered the words that sealed his fate. "Give me the power, and take what you must." In that instant, the basement vanished, and Elias found himself standing in a suit that cost more than his old life. The deal was done. The countdown had begun, and the man who had nothing was now the man who owned everything, unaware that he had just sold the only thing that truly mattered. Deal sealed, the world became Elias Thorne's chessboard. Overnight, a man who once struggled for a loaf of bread was now dictating the global economy. His rise was not just fast, it was supernatural. Companies he touched turned into gold. Rivals who stood in his way vanished into thin air or faced sudden, unexplained ruin. He built skyscrapers that pierced the clouds and bought private islands where he could hide from the sun. People called him a genius, a visionary. But Elias knew the truth. He could feel the shadow he had met in that basement, always standing just behind him, just out of sight. In his massive boardrooms, the air would suddenly turn ice cold, even in the middle of summer. His reflections in the glass windows didn't always mimic his movements. Sometimes, his reflection would stare back at him with hollow, dark eyes while he was looking away. He surrounded himself with the loudest music and the brightest lights, trying to drown out the whispers that began to echo through his mansion at 3 a.m. The whispers spoke of a debt, not of money, but of time. Every billion he made felt heavier, like a chain tightening around his soul. He had the world at his feet, but he couldn't sleep without the lights on. He realized that his wealth wasn't a kingdom, it was a cage. He had everything he ever wanted, but the joy had been replaced by a lingering, suffocating dread. The more he spent, the faster the clock seemed to tick. The 21 years that once felt like an eternity were now slipping through his fingers like sand, and the shadows in his mansion were growing longer, hungrier, and more patient. 15th year of his reign, Elias Thorne realized that his wealth was not a shield, but a target. He had more money than any human in history, yet he felt like a prisoner in his own skin. He began to notice things that science couldn't explain. In his high-tech laboratories, the world's best computers would suddenly glitch, displaying ancient symbols that no one could translate. His security teams, armed with the latest thermal cameras, would report cold spots in the middle of his heated office, shapes that moved like liquid smoke. Desperate for a way out, Elias spent billions on underground bunkers, thinking that if he hid deep enough under the earth, the shadow couldn't find him. He consulted occult experts, historians, and even scientists who studied the fabric of time. He offered $1 billion to anyone who could break a spiritual contract. But every expert who entered his mansion left in a state of shock, refusing to speak about what they saw in Elias's eyes. He stopped looking at his bank accounts. The numbers no longer brought him joy. They felt like a countdown. Every time he bought a new company, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if a piece of his heart was being traded for more gold. He became a ghost in his own empire, wandering through his empty halls at night, talking to walls. He was trying to negotiate, trying to offer more money to buy just one more year of life. But the shadows don't care about inflation. The deal was etched in the stars, and the stars don't bargain. Elias was learning the hard way that the richest man in the world is also the poorest when his time is up. The clock on the wall of the Thorne mansion didn't just tick. It felt like a hammer striking an anvil. It was 11:45 p.m. on the final night of the 21st year. Elias Thorne stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, looking out at the city he literally owned. Millions of lights flickered below, and every single one of them paid tribute to his name. But for the first time in 2 decades, Elias felt completely, utterly alone. He had called his lawyers, his doctors, and even his private army. But as the minutes bled away, he realized that no human power could stop what was coming. At 11:55, the electricity in the mansion didn't just flicker, it died. Not a single backup generator kicked in. The silence was heavier than the darkness. Elias reached for his gold-plated phone, but the screen was pitch black. Then, he heard it. Not a scream, not a bang, but the slow, rhythmic sound of footsteps on the marble floor. Footsteps that echoed from a basement thousands of miles away, and 21 years in the past. The air turned so cold that Elias's breath came out in white clouds. The shadow he had invited in wasn't just in the room, it was the room. "I gave you everything," a voice whispered, vibrating through the very bones of the building. "I gave you the world. Now, I have come to collect the interest." Elias didn't beg for his life. He knew the contract. He looked at his hands, the hands that had signed checks for billions, and watched as they began to fade into gray smoke. By the time the clock struck 12, the trillionaire was gone. He didn't die. He simply ceased to exist in this reality. The next morning, the sun rose over a leaderless empire. The gold remained, the buildings remained, but the soul that traded itself for them was lost in the void. As we look at the empty throne of Elias Thorne, we must ask, what are we willing to trade for our dreams? Is a life of endless gold worth an eternity of shadows? Elias Thorne thought he was the master of the world, but in the end, he was just a temporary tenant in a house built of greed. Thank you for watching this journey into the dark side of wealth. If this story chilled your soul, share it with someone who dreams too much of gold. Don't forget to subscribe to Fortune Fears and hit the notification bell. Because remember, the shadows are always watching, and the next deal might be yours.